Hi, it's time for another verb of the day. Today's verb is foretell. And this verb was suggested by the viewer Luis. Luis, thank you so much for sharing yet another great idea. Now let's begin and look at the definition of this verb. Foretell really only has one meaning, and it means to predict the future or to predict a future event. So, this might be an interesting verb for the beginning of a new year, right? You might begin to hear this used as people make predictions about what they think will occur. For now, you should know that foretell is an irregular verb. Our verb is going to follow the same pattern as the verb tell. So to make the progressive form of this verb, all you need to do is add ing to the end, and that forms foretelling. The past tense and the participle form of this verb are going to have a spelling change. So tell becomes told. Again, just like that other verb. So past tense participle form is pronounced foretold. Foretold. Okay. Now, you might be happy to know no additional phrasal verbs for us to review or practice today, so we can move on to our practice with some different verb tenses. Today, I thought we could review the past perfect and the simple present. Let's use the past perfect first with our verb of the day. We use the past perfect verb tense to talk about completed actions. But what makes them a little different than just the simple past tense is that we're using this slightly different verb tense to note that an action occurred before a certain point in time or before another action. To make past perfect sentences, you're going to need two parts to your verb to help you remember that. Notice the two P's, past perfect, right? That can help you remember those two parts to the verb. So in the affirmative, we'll start our sentences with the subject. We'll use the past form of have, which is had, and then we'll use the participle form of the verb. You can see this in the example sentence that's on the screen. A woman killed by her partner had foretold her own death by warning she would die at his hands. Now, this is kind of an upsetting, unpleasant sentence, but you can sort of see how she predicted this very unfortunate event. I think the sentence was used to describe some true crime documentary or maybe some podcast, again going to tell us this particular story. So someone was trying to tell friends and family, I think this person is going to kill me, and unfortunately she was correct. Now, if you want to make a negative past perfect sentence, again, start with your subject, use had not, and then the participle form of the verb. You might also see the contraction hadn't. Here's another example. He hadn't foretold the panic-stricken future in his 2011 movie. So, in retrospect, many times people watch certain movies and think, oh my gosh, this is exactly what's happening now. What happened in this particular person's mind? Here, someone is using the negative. Finally, if you want to make a yes or no question in the past perfect, to do this, start with had, then you're going to have the subject, and then the participle form of our verb. Here's my last past perfect example. Had the scouting report foretold how they would guard her? So I saw sentences similar to this, talking about various games, athletic competitions. So many teams do research, think about how opponents will play them. And again, sometimes they're able to predict how teams will behave or perform. Now, let's move on and talk about the simple present. We use this verb tense to talk about our habits and our routines. We can also use it to discuss facts. The thing to remember about the simple present is that we must pay attention to our subject because our verb will change based on what the subject is. If our subject is I, you, we, or they, you're going to use the base verb. So no suffixes, no additional words here, just the base verb in the affirmative. But if your subject is he, she, or it, then you need to add an S to the end of the verb. And I think you can see that here. A delayed brain response to viewing faces foretells social skill development lags in both children and adults. So this sentence was taken, and I think I maybe did a little bit of editing to keep it a bit shorter here, but it was borrowed from a research paper that was discussing ways that autism could be detected earlier in individuals. And so this is one hypothesis. This sentence is stated like a fact. So from their research, delayed brain's response helped predict this particular condition. Now, if you want to make a negative simple present sentence, again, pay attention to your subject. If the subject is I, you, we, or they, use do not and then the base verb. Or you could use don't and then the base verb. If your subject is he, she, or it, use does not and then the base verb. Notice I'm not adding an S to the end of the verb here in the negative. Let's look at another example. Polls don't foretell the future. I heard this a lot in the past few months, particularly related to the US election. So it's commonplace for people to get phone calls and asked for whom they'll be voting or how they will vote on a particular issue. And people use that information to try and predict what the outcomes will be. Here, the sentence is suggesting that they are not always reliable. Now let's look at making a yes or no question in the simple present. To do this, again, start with do or does, whichever form matches your subject. That subject comes next. Then use the base verb. Again, I always like to repeat this. The only time I'm adding an S to the end of the verb is in the affirmative when my subject is he, she, or it. Let's take a look at that last example. Does an active start to hurricane season foretell a wild year? Okay, so here we're talking about really powerful storms that form over the oceans. And again, we're sort of asking about if we see many at the beginning of the time period where they are most commonly occurring, does that mean we're just going to have a very busy and crazy sort of hurricane season? And I think that here the research says not always. There are many factors that can influence that. But now let's move on and talk about some words that are related to our verb foretell. The first word we're going to discuss is the noun form of this word. We're going to add an ER suffix to form foreteller. That ER suffix generally means a person who, so as you can see, our definition here is someone who predicts future events or developments. An example of this in a sentence might be, the foreteller revealed his prediction for when World War III would begin. Again, something else that's not so pleasant to think about. So we'll move on. One more related word for us today. It's an adjective, foretellable. The suffix able on the ends of words in English generally are adjectives, and they're telling us or describing something that relates back. So here, able to be anticipated or able to be foretold, predicted. Okay. An example of this, and as I looked for examples of this particular adjective, it seemed like they might be a little more common in literature. And so I borrowed a sentence from a story. The judgment of their hearts is foretellable. So kind of like we know how they're going to react in this particular situation. Thanks again to Luis for suggesting today's verb, and I thank you all for watching. Have a great day.